Hello, Barneys. Hey there, Barneys. Today we're going to be deep diving into the art of shaping rocker. We're going to cover bottom rocker first and then deck rocker and a bunch of little things in between. Maybe we'll get to rails. That might be next video. So let's start.
Access granted.
We're gonna start with the bottom rocker breakdown. So we're gonna cover three major points: the center rocker, the tail rocker, and the nose rocker. And I'm going to explain how each of those are going to be shaped into the surfboard based off of the outline of the surfboard and what type of waves you're gonna be surfing in. First, we're going to talk about center rocker. So one important thing is to have the pinnacle or axis of your rocker be at the center of the wide point of your board. For example, I'm going to set this board here. About right here is the center of the wide point of the outline of the board. I want all of my nose rocker and all of my tail rocker leading up to this one point in the center. You can check that by laying your board down on your racks flat or laying it down on the floor and just kind of eyeballing it out. If it's not perfect, it's not a huge deal, but that's one thing you always want to remember while shaping the rocker. I've determined that my rocker is already good in the center, that the wide point along with the axis of the rocker, if that's what you would call it, is lined up properly. So now we're going to move on to tail rocker. Tail rocker is basically everything behind the center of your board's rocker. I really have started to enjoy creating an exaggerated break right before the fins in my rocker. I'll have it fairly flat up until the point of the front of the base of my fin, and then I'll create at that point a very exaggerated break, increasing the rocker. If you're planning on doing a rocker like this, you first have to know where your fins are going to be placed. In this case, I was originally planning on making it a thruster, but after riding this board 3 or 4 times, I remembered that I don't like thrusters. So I'm going to make this into a twinser setup. So if you're planning on using a thruster setup, grab your favorite thruster and measure from the very tip of the tail of the board up to the front of the base of the fin. If you don't have fins in the board, just measure up to the very front of your fin box, the front of where the hole in the box is, or the slot for the fin is. So to do this, I'm going to use my shaper square, and you can use a normal tape measure, but I just like using this big straight edge. First, I'm going to line up the center line with the stringer of my surfboard with the thingy butted up to the front of the base of my twinser fins. Right there, that's good. And I'm going to take my straight edge and lay it down and see what it reads. 16 and a quarter. Now I know that the break for the tail rocker on my new board is going to be at approximately 16 and a quarter inches from the tail. Now I'm going to put a mark on the board that I'm about to start shaping the rocker into, 16 inches from the tail, so I have a good reference point on where to start the break of the rocker. When you start shaping your rocker, you never want to come at it like this way and start shaping from the back, because then you're putting a really weird angle into the board that probably isn't going to end up looking natural. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the center of the board. I'm going to feather the adjustment, so I'm going to start on pretty much closed, or all the way closed, and as soon as I get to my point where I have the break, I'm going to open up the cut, I'm going to open up the shoe so that I can take a cut out of the board here, and so it's all going to flow together evenly when we're done. When you do this, try and remember how far you're opening up your shoe so that you're not making different cuts every single time. going to repeat this process until I have the rocker at the point that I want it to be. I know I shared this in the last video, but it's always good to look at your board from different perspectives. I like to lay my board out this way, crouch down, take a look at it, and see what I think, and then go back to adjusting the rocker. It's good to inspect your board from all different angles to make sure that you're doing everything symmetrically. When I lift up the tail of the board this way, I can plainly see that I've taken more out here than I have on this side. I'll go ahead and adjust that to make it nice and perfect. So once I'm happy with the tail rocker, I'll go ahead and smooth it out by planing the whole board just on a really low cut and try and take out any lumps or bumps that I can see. To make a very fine adjustment, I'm going to take my shear form and just run it across the board a couple of times. So if you're wondering why I'm doing all these little fine tuning steps now, it's because this rocker that I have is going to be the final rocker on the surfboard. When I come back and I start doing my concaves and my channels and all the little stuff, I want this to be perfectly even, perfectly symmetrical, so that later I don't have to even think about leveling out the board or anything like that. Although it takes a little bit more time up front, in the long run, it's going to take a lot less time because I'm not tinkering back and forth trying to make sure that I have the board totally even. As Jim likes to say, a lot of people don't have time to do it right the first time, but they have time to do it again, and I don't like doing it twice. For a nose rocker, you're going to want to be thinking about harmony with the outline. The narrower the outline, the more rocker the board is going to want to have. And also, the parts of your outline that have a more increased curve, such as right in front of your wide point, is going to have probably the most curve out of the whole outline. And in those spots where you have an increased curve, you're going to want to have an increased rocker to match it. Like I said, where there's the more curve, you need more rocker. So after looking over the rocker of this blank, I see that in this area, where there's the most curve in the outline, I need to add more rocker to match that. We're going to be adding rocker by taking foam off of the board in those certain areas. So very similar to adding the rocker in the tail, we're going to be starting from the center of the board and feathering open our shoe for a deeper cut. It's a little bit different though, because this is going to be all one smooth transition, unlike the tail where I put an exaggerated break in it. So we're going to be careful to do everything even, symmetrically, and smoothly. And as we come forwards on the nose of the board, one important part is to remember to weight the planer correctly. So you don't want to be lifting up the back of it, and you don't want to be doing a wheelie with the front of it. And so you want to remember to keep the weight of the planer over the blade. So just gently, you don't really want to press down, but you just kind of want to balance the planer where the blades are. bad flip in the nose of the board. A lot of times you'll see people come at it and go like this. And that's not good. Don't do that. You want to take your planer the same way we have been with everything else and run down and open up your shoe to create that curve so that you're gonna have a line coming from where your rocker is already good. So it's gonna adjust the bad rocker, take the bad rocker out, and you're gonna keep good rocker instead of having two totally different angles coming and butting up against each other, which is not good. It looks really bad. So don't do it. Now we're on deck rocker. The thing about deck rocker is that your planer blades are not going to fit into every part of the board. For example, you can see there's still skin here from the top of the blank that I haven't shaped away yet. What I'm going to do to be able to get into these tighter curves is I'm going to turn my planer, like I said last time, at a 45-degree angle, and so that my blades can end up touching this part of the board. Because if you're like this, you can see here, there'll be a gap between the blades and the board. But as you turn it, that gap closes. So the way that I tend to tackle getting all of this foam out of here first is that I'll just take my planer, run it up the nose of the board really, really slowly, because if you go fast, you'll explode the stringer. I'll kind of take a bulk of this foam out before I start planing the rest of the board. Then I'll blend those two together, or else you're gonna be putting kind of like narrow flute channels down this part of your board with the barrel of the planer. Some people will go at a 45-degree angle across the board like this. I just don't like that because it can rip a big chunk of your stringer out. I'll usually come in from the entry to smooth this out and make it so the blades can hit it for the most part, and then I'll come back and take my normal passes, smoothing everything together. Now that I have the thickness of the nose approximately where I'm gonna want it, I'm gonna start shaping in the curve of the rest of the rocker. Since the board is already approximately as thick as I want it to be, I'm gonna try to not cut too much out of the center. Every cut that you make through the center of the board is gonna make your board gradually thinner and thinner and thinner, and especially if you're gonna put concave in there, you have to account for that. So I had to end up using the planer at the 45-degree angle like I told you guys I don't usually do because there's so much rocker in this board. So what I'm going to do now is take my modified little block plane and I'm going to scoop out the stringer a little bit, just clean it up a tiny bit before we move on to getting the tail rocker. Similar to the electric planer, these little block planes, you do the same thing to get them to fit into the curve of the nose rocker. Like this, the blade's not gonna hit, it's not gonna cut, it's not gonna do anything at all. So as you turn it at an angle, the blade will be able to touch the surface of the stringer and it should cut. as you can see here, tail of the board is too thick. And I like the tail rocker from the bottom. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna get rid of the thickness. Probably just gonna flatten out the rocker from the center point to, I don't know, probably about here, because I'm gonna end up pulling this up a little bit further. And so the way we're gonna do that is we're actually gonna start on this end, which we don't usually do. And I'm gonna take a cut. It's almost like you're drawing a line from this point to this point. And so I'm gonna start with a more open cut and close the shoe the further I get. And then I'll multiple times come back, check it, eyeball it to see if it looks right. And then once I get it to the point that I like it, then we're done. So folks, we're pretty much done. There we have it, my Barneys. We've covered bottom rocker for the center nose and tail. We've covered deck rocker for the nose and tail. And we have a surfboard that's looking pretty good. I left it thick here so that I can come back, adjust it a little bit in the very end. Now you guys should have a basic understanding of it. Next time we're gonna be doing the rails, which is a very important and fundamental part of a surfboard. So stick around for that. Thank you guys, and we'll see you in the next video.